Welcome, dear friends, to an incredible journey back in time, far beyond written history, to the world of prehistoric Britain. Long before the Romans, before the Normans, before the great medieval castles, people built homes from wood, stone, and earth, creating shelters that shaped the foundations of life for thousands of years. But what did these early houses look like? Who lived in them, and how did they survive in a world without cities, agriculture, or modern tools? Today, we explore the fascinating remains of Britain's prehistoric homes, from the mysterious Neolithic villages of Skara Brae to the roundhouses of the Bronze and Iron Ages. How were these houses built? What materials did people use? And what can archaeology tell us about the daily lives of prehistoric families? Through expert analysis, stunning reconstructions, and groundbreaking discoveries, we will step inside these ancient homes and uncover the secrets of Britain's first settlers. This is Time Stream, and our journey into prehistory begins now.
Iron Age villages in Britain, which date from approximately 800 BC to AD 43, were the homes of Celtic tribes and early farming communities. These villages were often located in strategic positions such as hilltops, river valleys, or open plains, offering both protection and access to natural resources. The typical Iron Age village consisted of roundhouses, circular homes made from timber, wattle and daub walls, and thatched roofs. These structures were designed to be durable and warm, with a central hearth for cooking and heating.
So probably different people in the group would have different jobs. Again, where houses have been found together, where these roundhouses have been found together, there is evidence that maybe one house in the settlement, somebody did the pottery and it's set up to do pottery. There may be another house where the evidence would show they were the ones that prepared the skins to make leather clothing, to make shoes, whatever they needed leather for, to make bags for collecting things. The ladies would often do the weaving, the spinning of the wool, okay? But they would also be part of their hunter-gatherer bit of going out and picking things. They were farmers generally, but there were points where tribes would be fighting with tribes. So a lot of the warriors, I think, would be more the men than the women, and the women would stay at home and be sort of doing the domestic things. I don't think there's a lot of it. It's very difficult to tell because obviously the most information we have about the Iron Age was written by the Romans when they came. And the Romans came to conquer us. They didn't come to live with us together. They wanted to conquer us. They wanted to take over. So if you think about it, anybody, if they're writing about their enemy, it's not going to be good things they write. They tend to write that we were barbaric people who lived in smoky, muddy huts and didn't do very much at all, which evidence says that's not true at all. Okay, but that would be the way the Romans perceived us. But I think it would have been quite a settled life, apart from when they were competing with other tribes for things in the surrounding areas or trying to take over. But generally a sort of farming, peaceful life rather than a lot of fighting. And as I say, until the Romans came and really interrupted things, there might be the odd skirmish between the tribes. But other than that, I would have said it was a fairly sort of domestic life that you can imagine in one of those lovely roundhouses, going out and doing your farming and collecting nuts and berries and perhaps making some ale, because ale was better than the water at the time, so they would make up an ale to drink instead of water. Obviously the mums would be looking after the little children more. The children didn't go to school, but they would be learning hands-on skills that would help them in their adult life. So yeah, quite a peaceful existence, I think, until the Romans came. looked at our Iron Age houses. Now that was moving on from the Stone Age, so that they became more rounded, hence the round house. And a lot of that was to do with the fact that the big trees and things had disappeared, and they also found that a round shape is much stronger. So the houses are much stronger being round rather than the corners, because we've experimented and had houses that are very, very rectangle, and they tend to crack because they catch the wind on the corners more. So the round houses are very practical, and the smoke heats them up much better because they're round. Again, there would be no secrets or anything.
Villages varied in size but were usually small, housing extended families or small clans. In some areas, especially in southern Britain, larger fortified settlements developed, known as hill forts. These sites, like Maiden Castle or Danebury, featured defensive earthworks, ditches, and wooden palisades to guard against rival tribes. The layout of Iron Age villages was often irregular, with houses and animal enclosures arranged organically around communal spaces.
So the construction, we know they were made in that way because the only thing that's left behind is the footprint. So where those big pillars have come from the top to the bottom, there will be a different colour soil in the ground, which tends to be referred to as post holes, even though it won't look like a hole in the archaeology, but it's where the post has rotted down into the ground. So that bit of mud, that bit of soil, will be a different colour from what's surrounding it. So from there we can work out the size of the house by the spacings of those poles. And then mathematicians, not me, mathematicians will work out how the roof will fit on. So we tend to put the posts in first, and then we would do what we call the roof beams, and they would do the rafters of the roof. Won't put the lid on yet, won't put the thatching on yet, and the walls will have what's called wattle and daub.
Villages varied in size but were usually small, housing extended families or small clans. In some areas, especially in southern Britain, larger fortified settlements developed, known as hill forts. These sites, like Maiden Castle or Danebury, featured defensive earthworks, ditches, and wooden palisades to guard against rival tribes. The layout of Iron Age villages was often irregular, with houses and animal enclosures arranged organically around communal spaces.
The wattle is woven wood, so like you've seen some of the fences, it's wood woven in and out. Tend to use things like hazel and willow because they're so flexible. And that will make a fence in the shape that we want right the way around those posts. So that's the walls, that's what's on the inside. Then we make up a mix called daub, which has 5 things in it. It has cow poo, because that's about the best. We have used some horse manure, I believe, in the Stone Age house, but we usually use cow poo because it's so stretchy. So when the houses are hot in the summer, the plaster, the daub doesn't crack, and when they're cold and they shrink in the winter, it still doesn't crack because it's flexible. So we have the cow poo, we have some straw, we might have some mud, we might have some animal hair as insulation, and we mix it all up with water, so we make like a gooey mix that we splatter onto those fences to fill in all the holes. And we do it on the inside and we do it on the outside. So really the fence has become the middle of the sandwich, and then the daub is on the outside, so filling all those holes in. And then we come to the thatching of the roof. Now obviously because of health and safety we tend to use metal ladders now, but they would have made themselves ladders out of wood. And they start at the bottom and they work their way up, and then eventually what we have on the very top, if you look when you turn around in a minute, you'll see there's like a cone just sat on the top, and that's to enclose, because it's all open where it's all gone like that. Again, the evidence is shaky, but a lot of people think, well, you've got a fire underneath, why haven't you got a hole for the smoke to go out of? But the smoke actually filters through the thatch, and because the thatch is smoky, you don't get as many insects in there, and so you don't get so many birds coming to peck at the insects and to take the thatch away to make nests. Whereas nowadays, when you have a thatch roof, they put that chicken wire over to stop that. Obviously, they didn't have chicken wire back in the Iron Age. But we did experiment with a house where we had to redo the roof. We took the cap off of the roof, and the fire is drawn up because there's oxygen at the top, and it set fire to the roof. So our evidence tells us they didn't have a hole at the top, otherwise their roofs would be setting alight all the time, okay? So that's how we do it. We do that lovely conical shape in a thatch. And most of the doorways are facing east because that's where the sun comes up in the morning, so that they've got the longest day, okay? Again, evidence varies on what furniture they would have in there. The biggest house in our enclosure we think belonged to a chieftain, and it would have been his extended family in there, because it's so huge. I mean, that wouldn't have just been one family in there. Normally, we've done it like a little village. If there was a village, it would be right on top of a hill. It wouldn't be there like that, okay? We've done that so it's lovely and easy to walk around and to talk about, but they would have it on a hill fort. So it's very unusual for it to be close together like that. They would have lots of jobs to do throughout the day. You know, they would have to go and get firewood and collect water, all of these things. They would all sleep on skins, we would imagine, but there are some evidences of beds. If it was really cold, they would have their animals indoors as well. The fire would be kept going the whole time because they needed it for heating, they needed it to cook on, and they also needed it for light, because you may have noticed no windows at all.
Life in these villages revolved around agriculture and animal husbandry. People grew crops such as barley, wheat, and oats, and raised cattle, sheep, and pigs. Tools and weapons were increasingly made from iron, which was stronger than the bronze previously used. Pottery, weaving, and metalwork were common crafts, and trade existed between different regions.
So this is our Danebury house, made with plank walls based on an excavation at Danebury Hill in Hampshire. Like all of them, the door faces to the eastern part of the sky, so we get the morning sun and we can make the most of the light as it comes in. And we think that possibly over this side you would have done the activities that needed most light. So we've got the quern for grinding the corn, got all our cooking pots, we've got our kitchen area and the area where we eat at the back, but things like sleeping and storage would have happened on this side of the house, which would have been much darker. We've got experiments up here where we've smoked some meat, and I think they've eaten that after 2 years. It's been up there, they said it was quite tough, but you could still eat it. And recently they were smoking salmon up here, so that's what this is for. They would have cooked in their cauldron, made things like soups and stews, because that took a lot less wood than roasting something, or they would have roasted meat for special occasions when they would have gone feasting or something like that. Ate on the floor, so you were actually below the level of the smoke, because the smoke will rise up and form a ceiling. And we know that the Romans, when they came, wrote that they ate low down on the floor, and the table there was based on something found in a bog in Ireland, I believe. So that's why we based that, and they probably had some back to lean against, and they used it more like a tray than a table than we did. They would have carried their food to them and put it there, we think, rather than sat round the table to eat like we do today. Bed here with the woven things. They would have used their loom. By this time they're dyeing wool. They're breeding white sheep, so they can use natural plants to dye the wool. they're weaving things like a twill weave, lots of checks and stripes and bright colours, and they would export that around the Roman Empire because they were quite well known for their cloth making, but they could use that to make blankets. The mattress is stuffed with straw, and the actual bed frame is based on, I think it was from Germany, but I'm not sure, but they know that they had the tools and the technology to actually make something like that. We've got sheep's wool for the pillow, and obviously the blankets and skins things there that they would have covered themselves up with when they slept.
Despite being pre-literate societies, the people of Iron Age Britain had rich traditions, spiritual beliefs, and social hierarchies. Archaeological discoveries from village sites, such as food remains, tools, jewelry, and burial practices, give us valuable insight into their daily lives and cultural identity. These villages represent a key chapter in Britain's prehistoric past, showing how communities were organized and how they adapted to their environment long before the arrival of the Romans.
The ordinary Iron Age people would have probably just stood a big flat stone by the fire to cook something as simple as flatbread on. But I can't heat that up. So the fire dogs are from the late Iron Age and are found in late Iron Age graves and are high-end feasting equipment, similarly cauldrons. But we have also found tripods, though the one in the house next door is better to the Iron Age style. But if you look at where the big loop is, the chain from there downwards is based on a similar find where you'd have had two chains coming down from a tripod like the one next door to suspend a cauldron over a fire. So I've had the chain made by a blacksmith. Now, because I can't do a big stone, I've actually taken the pan off a medieval skillet and suspended that from the Iron Age chain. Now, given they could make these fire dogs, they could have made a pan like that for the Iron Age, but they just wouldn't have used something as upmarket as this to cook flatbread in. Fire dogs, chains and big iron cauldrons are high-end people's feasting equipment when the successful warrior wants to feast his warband of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 people in a house as big as this. But the ordinary people would have used clay pots, or stones and things like that.
As we conclude our journey into the prehistoric homes of England, we leave with a deeper appreciation of how our earliest ancestors lived, adapted, and built the foundations of society. Iron Age roundhouses dwellings tell a story of survival, ingenuity, and human connection to the land. Though time has eroded their structures, archaeology allows us to step back in time and rediscover their secrets. Each excavation brings us closer to understanding the daily lives of those who came before us. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of the past. Until next time, keep uncovering history. This is Time Stream. See you next time.